Hello everyone, welcome back to CloudOpsCraft. Today we are going to discuss about Docker troubleshooting and monitoring in our Docker scenario based interview series. Okay, let's start. The first question is, container exists immediately. Why? If that's this question, interview context will be, this is a common first troubleshooting question. Interviewers want you to reason systematically. Okay, let me explain this. Containers exist immediately if the main process inside terminates. This can happen due to commands like docker run or cmd or entry point finishing immediately. Okay, for example, echo allow, which means after printing allow the main process exists, right? So that will be one of the reasons. Second is application crash due to misconfiguration, second reason. Third reason will be missing dependencies or incorrect environment variables or missing files. Okay, so how to answer an interview? I will check the container logs using docker logs and the container name or container id. Using that, I'll review container logs. I'll inspect the command executed and I'll verify environment variables and ensure dependencies exist. Often adding a simple sleep or interactive mode helps to debug why it is exited. Okay, so the next question is, app logs not showing, how to debug? Okay, if there's this question, entry context will be they want you to know container logging mechanisms. Okay, let me explain. Let's go to standard out std out std error by default. Docker logs reads these streams. Okay, if the app writes logs to files inside the container, you may need to Docker exec you have to use into container to view them. Docker logging drivers may redirect logs to syslogs, journal D or external tools, which affects visibility. So how to answer an interview? I will first check docker logs. If nothing appears, I execute into the container to see app level logs. I also verify the logging driver and where logs are redirected externally. Okay, so this is how we have to answer. Third question is, difference between docker logs and a docker execute. If they ask this question, entry context will be they check knowledge of container interaction and debugging. Okay, so the thing is, first docker logs. The purpose of docker logs is docker logs container id you have to use docker logs, and you have to provide your container. Okay, which reads standard output and standard error for the container main process. But if you use docker exec hyphen it and container and you are using shell to enter into it, it opens an interactive shell inside the running container to inspect the file system, processes, environment, and run commands. Okay, how to answer in an interview? Docker logs is for viewing container output, while Docker execute lets you enter the container to troubleshoot interactively. Okay, so the next question is, how to debug resource usage? Interview context, they want if they ask this question, interview context will be they want candidates to know monitoring tools and basic linux and docker metrics. Let me explain. First is docker stats. First is docker stats shows real-time cpu, memory, network, and io usage per container. Next is docker inspect. Okay, it shows memory and cpu limits. Okay, you can use tools like top, htop, io stat, okay, for os level resource analysis. Check logs for oom kills or cpu spikes. Okay, so how to answer an interview? I use docker stats for container level resource metrics. I'll inspect limits with docker inspect and cross check host level tools. If a container is hitting limits, I adjust memory and cpus, or I'll optimize the app. like that you can answer. Okay, so the next question is, explain docker inspect output sections. If they ask this question, they want familiarity with the container metadata for debugging. Let me explain. First, key sections. Let me explain key sections of docker inspect. Docker inspect. While coming to key sections, first is id or name or path or argument. Okay, this is for container identity and command. Second is state. It will let you know whether it is ending or exited or exit code or started at or finished at. Third is config. Okay, image, env vars, command, working directory, user, all these things you can view. Next is host config. Okay, it mounts, we will know about mounts, cpu memory limits, network mode, capabilities and all we can get here. Next is network settings. IP addresses, exposed ports, network aliases, all these things we can get here. Okay, so how to answer an interview? Docker inspect provides container metadata like config info, state, host resource, limits, mounts, and networking. I use it to debug my containers fail or cannot connect. Okay, so the next question is, what is Docker events used for? What's Docker events used for? What is the purpose of Docker events? This is the interview question. Okay, if they ask this question, the interview context will be, they will test knowledge of monitoring real time Docker actions. Let me explain. The first command, if you execute the command Docker events, what will happen? Docker events, it streams real-time Docker events, container start and stop, image pull, network create and remove, volume create, delete, all these things. It will be useful for auditing, monitoring automation, or debugging container lifecycle problems. Okay, so how to answer an interview? Docker events let me see real-time Docker activity, like that it will do. Okay, which helps debug unexpected container stops, image pulls, or network issues. Okay, so the next is real world scenario. Okay, container restarts repeatedly, what are all the steps you will take to fix it? If they ask this question, the interview context will be, interviewers want systematic troubleshooting. Okay, so let me explain the step by step procedure to handle this. Okay, container restarts repeatedly. Okay, then what are all steps you need to do is, first is you have to check container logs. Okay, using docker log command. This is the first step. Second step is you have to inspect exist code. Okay, you can use docker inspect format equal to state dot exit code, and you can provide container. Okay, so with the help of exist code you can know what kind of issue you are facing. Next is you can check, you can do l check. L check is important. Okay, if you are using this in docker file, then you can use this to check your health. Okay, next is you have to inspect resource limit. Okay, memory and cpu. Okay, memory limits and cpu limits. Next is you have to review bind mounts for the file access issues. And the next step, what you have to do is you have to ensure environment variables or dependencies are correct. And temporarily what you can do is you can disable restart policy. Okay, to stop restart loops and investigate. Okay, how to answer an interview? I check logs, exist codes, l checks, and resource constraints, then verify mounts and env vars. I temporarily stop automatic restarts to debug interactively. This is how you have to answer. Okay, the next question is how to check why image build failed. How to check why image build is failed. If that's this question, okay, interview context will be accessing Docker file debugging skills. Okay, they are accessing your Docker debugging skills. Let me explain. Build failures usually show step number and error. For example, you can even use docker build hyphen progress equal to plain. Okay, you can use this, or even you can use hyphen no hyphen catchy, okay, to see detailed logs. And you can inspect copy or run commands for missing files, wrong paths, or failing scripts. And you can validate base image and dependencies. Okay, how to answer an interview. I review the build logs with hyphen progress equal to plain. I'll verify Docker file commands, and I'll check file paths for copy and add, and I'll rebuild without catchy to isolate the failing step. This is how you have to answer. Next question. How to review container environment variables? Any idea? If they ask this question, the entry context will be candidate should know inspection methods. Okay. First, let me explain the inspection methods. We already discussed, right? We can go with the Docker inspect. Okay, with the container. Okay. In this you can go to .config .env section. Second is you can do docker exec, okay, and you can for running container environment. Otherwise you can go with docker compose config, also shows resolved environment variables. Okay, how to answer an interview. I use docker inspect to see configured env vars or exec into the container, and run env to see live variables. Next question. Disk space issue due to Docker. How to resolve? If they ask this question, entry context will be they want cleanup strategies for practical host maintenance. Okay, so let me explain. Docker images, containers, volumes, and network can consume space. Okay, so how to check that? Okay, we have several commands to check it. First is to view your disk usage summary. You can use the command called docker system df, okay, for disk usage summary. And if you want to remove unused containers, images, or networks, then just go docker system run -a. Okay, it will remove unused containers, images, and networks. And if you want to remove dangling volumes means, then just execute docker volumes run. Okay, remove unused images or old build artifacts. Okay, so how to answer an interview. I analyze usage with the docker system df. I'll remove unused resource with run commands and monitor disk usage to avoid filling the host. Okay, this is how you have to answer. So the next question is container network unreachable. How to fix it? If they ask this question, the entry context will be they will test networking troubleshooting skills. Okay, let me explain step by step. First, you have to check container network. Okay, first you have to check container network using the command docker network inspect, and you can provide your network. Second is you have to verify IP assignment and gateway. Third is you have to test connectivity via docker exec, okay, container ping service. Okay, and the next step what you can do is you can check firewall IP tables rules on host. After that, you can ensure correct service names for DNS resolution in Compose. Okay, how to answer an interview? I inspect the network, verify container IPs and routing. I'll ping dependent services and check firewall rules. Often it's a misconfigured network or missing alias. Okay, so the next question: how to check like orphan containers or images? If they ask this question, the entry contacts will be, they will test resource hygiene skills. Okay, first, orphan containers. How you can check orphan containers? Using docker ps-a command. Docker ps-a. Okay, it will check for stopped containers. Okay, orphan image. If you want to check orphan image, then you can use docker image -f dangling equal to true. Okay, use docker system prone to clean unused resource. How to answer an interview? I list stopped containers and dangling images, then then I'll use burn command for unused to remove unused resources to free disk and maintain clean host state. This is how we have to explain. Okay, so the next question is difference between exited and dead containers. If they ask this question, interview context will be, they are checking understanding of container lifecycle state. Okay, so the thing is, exited means container has finished execution, normal termination or failure. Exits on host can be restarted. Exits on host, it can be restarted. Dead means That means a container failed to stop or remove properly, needs manual cleanup. Okay, so how to answer an interview? Exited containers have finished execution and can be restarted. Dead containers indicate errors during stop and remove, usually require manual cleanup. Okay, next question: using L checks for monitoring. Okay, if they ask this question, interview contacts will be, interviewers want understanding of proactive container monitoring. Okay, let me explain. First is L check. You can use L check in Docker file or Compose. Okay, L check. Okay, defines a command to check container health, and you can use docker inspect command also to check state health status. Okay, and docker status like a compose or kubernetes can restart unhealthy containers automatically. Okay, you can, it helps detect issues early. Okay, app crashed but container still running. Okay, so what I'll do is, how to answer interview? I define L check commands to monitor service readiness. Unhealthy containers trigger alerts or automated restarts, providing proactive monitoring. Okay, so the next question: steps to capture live container metrics. Okay, if that's this question, entry context will be, they will test familiarity with observability tools. Okay, you can use docker stats. Okay, you can use docker stats for CPU, memory, network, and input output per container. And even you can use host level monitoring using top command or htop, or you can use IO stat. Okay, and you can logging metrics to Prometheus or Grafana via exporters like CAdvisor or Node Exporter. Optionally, you can use Docker API or SDK for custom metrics collection. Okay, so how to answer in an interview? I start with the Docker stats for live metrics combined with host monitoring, and for production integrate, I'll use CAdvisor or Prometheus to collect metrics over time. Okay, this is how we have to answer in an interview. If you like this breakdown, subscribe to CloudOpsCraft. We will simplify cloud and DevOps concepts every week. Thank you.